In this tutorial, we're going to look at setting up background reference images in 3ds Max. So I've downloaded from the web these drawings by Gary Sanchez for a model that he created. And I've put them in as layers into a Photoshop document. The Photoshop document is wide enough to have both well encompassed within it. I want to have this layer bang on center in its own section, and this other one bang in section in its own as well. So I'm going to bring up my rulers, go to View, Rulers. And from the rulers, I need to drag down guides. I want to drag down a guide that's halfway along the width, and then one that's halfway along that, so that this model will be centered to it. So one way of doing that is if I drag a selection, and if I drag it over here, when I get to the halfway mark, I should get a pink line come up. You can just see it coming up there. And if, as in that, there we go, that's getting me my pink line. I know that's now halfway along my edges. So I'm dragging a guide from the sides to give me something like that. Another thing I can do is if I drag a selection and it snaps to the guides, I can go right click, transform selection. And I'm going to go up here to the width for the transform, switching off the link. I'm going to type in 50%. So now my selection is half the width. If I drag it over here and snaps to the edge, I can now drag a guide right there, which is going to give me the halfway mark. And let's do it the same over here. Drag it right over there. So now, rather than counting out my ruler points and dragging a guide to that, it's giving me a starting point. Next thing I want to do is I want to, let's just deselect for a moment. I want to take the front-facing model, and I'm just going to line it up so as it centers bang on the guide. So the drawing was done with symmetry in mind, so that it will be perfectly half and half like that. So that's fine. My character is well enough framed within the scene. It's right centered, and I'm good to go. The other thing that I might want to do, though, is to line up the second character. So let's take this layer. I'm going to move it around. So I want this to be pretty much centered as well on that line. Just using my arrow keys there to move it around. But I also want to make sure that it's working with the guides vertically. So if I drag down a guide, let's say I'm going to drag down a guide to the top of the front view eyes, and I'll drag another one down to the bottom. I'll drag one to the top of our hat, and can drag one to the bottom of the chin, and a few other key points here. Bottom of where the shoes meet the ground, maybe the let's say go to the bottom of the second button, right that. So with those guides, it can help me line things up. I'm using my arrow keys right at the moment. Now, I know this one was pretty well set up, but more often than not, your side view is not going to be absolutely aligned. So you're going to need to distort it in different ways. One of the ways of doing that is go to your Edit, Transform, Warp. And with this, we can make some adjustments to the warp that you're doing. I'm going to go and have a look at my grid and say a 3x3 grid, so that if I wanted to, and if my drawing was slightly off, I can pull these points to adjust it so that the various target points, say top of the eyes, bottom of the eyes, etc., line up correctly from one point to the other. I don't need to do it in this case because I know that it's already done and I'm good to go. So what I want to do is I'm going to save this now to bring it into 3ds Max. So I'm just going to save a copy as ref and maybe save it as a JPEG. And save. Okay, so one thing I want to do before I do that is just check the image size of the document. And I can see it's 1200 by 861. I'm going to need to know that when I'm working with it in Max. So in Max now, I'm going to create a plane in the front view here. I'm going to make it 1200 wide by 161 high. And that's obviously incorrect. Let's go back into my size, image size, 1200 by 861. Okay, type in 861 right there. So that's giving me my proportions. Now, if that's bigger than you would be doing, so that's effectively an 8.5 meter tall view. So let's maybe scale this down in proportion. I can just check my measure here just to see what size it is. So this is down now to 183. Let's make it a bit smaller, something like that. So I'm also going to center it. Just right click on my X spinner, and my Y spinner is already, and the Z spinner. Let's do something like that. Maybe line it up with the ground. So I'm going to make a material, just a physical material. And on the base color map, I'm going to put on a bitmap. And for the bitmap, I'm going to choose my reference image and open. I'm going to apply my material onto the plane like that. And that is my reference image setup. One thing you might find, if you see there, I've gotten a bit of a shine on it. So I'm going to go into my material settings, and I'm going to dial the roughness all the way up to 1. That gets rid of the shine. So what I want to do now is to work with this as a background for modeling my character. Just for simplicity, I'm going to say I'm going to give it 2 length segments and 1 width segment. No, the other way around. I give it 1 length segment and two width segments. There we go. So that I can now separate the image out. There's my image, and I'm going to have my left view lined up here on the left, and my front view lined up there. So I'm going to, let's make a duplicate of the image. This time I'm going to rotate. I'm going to turn on my angle snap, and I'm going to shift rotate 90 degrees. And it's a copy, and that's fine. So I want to line these up a bit better now. So my front view here, I'm going to delete half of it. So let's convert it to editable poly. I'm going to take the part of it that I don't need, which is this polygon, and delete it. Now I'm going to do the same with the other one, the side view. I'm going to convert to editable poly. Going to take the polygon I don't need and delete it. So these are my 2 reference planes. Let's move this reference plane here. Oops. To line up something like that. So we've got a view on the left-hand side, and we've got a view on the front. Now, I want to work with this where I can see the left and I can see the front. So if I were to go to my front view now, and I'm changing it from wireframe to default shading, I'm seeing the front. And if I go to my left view, and I change from wireframe to default shading, I'm seeing the left. However, let's just see where we're going to have a problem here. I'm going to go to my view settings down here in the bottom left. I'm going to choose this layout. I'm going to make this my perspective view. Again, set it to default shading. It's my perspective view. I'm going to say this is my front view, default shading, and my left view and default shading. So what I want to do then is to model so that as I orbit around, these become see-through. So let's take this one here, right click, go to Object Properties, and I'm going to click on this back face cull and click OK. So now as I orbit around, I can see through the back of it. Only problem is that in doing that, my left view has become invisible. So we can easily fix that, selecting the polygon, flip the polygon so it goes back to front and its visibility, and yeah, try again, flip the polygon and exit there. So now my polygon is visible on this side and not on this side. So just to solve that problem, I'm going to move the polygon to line up like that. So far, I've got my front view and my left view. And now if I go around like that, I can't see the left view. That's good. Let's do the same with the front view. I can go to Object Properties, and I'm going to say Back Face Cull and go OK. I can also join the two into the one object, select the one of the views. I'm going to go to Attach and select the other one. Now I've got them both invisible from behind. So I'm pretty nearly ready to start modeling now. One thing that will help is if I can just line it up in the front there, so that I want my character to be lined up bang on there in front view. So I'm just going to drag it so that my midline of the character lines up with the midline of the object. Now I could become, if I wanted to make that absolutely precise, I can go into my effect pivot only, center to object, switch that off, and then I can just zero out the character's backdrop on the x-axis, and I know it's spot on. I'm going to move it also back so that it lines up approximately with the left axis. So all that done, I've got my reference images. I've got my transparent backgrounds. And the only thing that I might do now is, so that I don't accidentally select these and move them, right click and freeze selection. Problem with that is if you freeze something and it goes gray, that's not much good to us. So we need to go back into the object properties for the objects. Let's just unfreeze all first of all. So we go to object properties, select object properties, and I'm going to freeze, but turn off show frozen in gray. That gets me my setup perfectly. I can't accidentally select it, and I'm ready to start modeling. So now I can start with creating, say, a box here. We're going to be working in symmetry mode for my torso. And I can say, give it some divisions. Let's just change the color. Okay, so I can give it some divisions. Pressing F4 here to show my edges. So we've got divisions there. So I'm going to say it's got two. Let's say it's got one width segment and 3 height segments, make it 2 width segments, something like that. So I'm ready to start modeling, and I can, let's do our usual thing, center it on the X, and I'm going to go and Alt X to make it transparent, and oh yeah, we need to convert it to editable poly, and we can start moving verts around at this stage. So we want the shoulders, the waist, something like that. So I'm lining it up for the front view, and now we can see what that looks like in perspective mode. We can see what it looks like in front view and in side view. So if let's do our delete half of the object. We're going to apply symmetry. On the X and flip. Let's just press Alt X there to transparency. So with the symmetry, we're going to apply a turbo smooth, and we can model from there. So we can work at sub-object mode. We can press Alt S if we want to see the end result, Alt X if we want to see the transparency. We can orbit around in the perspective view and work from there. So that's using background references for your model.